We are so delighted to have Ms. Hughes here. We are incredibly delighted. I don't know if Ms. Hughes knows this, but you know, when you're traveling around the country and you say you're from Omaha, what's the first question they ask? And then you have to get in defense mode and say, there's 80,000 black people in Omaha. And then you run down the list. Did you know that Malcolm X is from Omaha? Did you know that Cathy Hughes is from Omaha? Did you know that Gabrielle Union is from Omaha? Did you know that John Beasley is from Omaha? Gail Sayers, Bob Gibson, Marlon Briscoe, on down the line. It's amazing when you think about Preston Love, Johnny Rogers. Come on, Johnny Rogers in the house. Think about the amazing people born and raised in Omaha. And as we were looking at having her here, I want to thank Johnny Rogers for helping us to make the connection and making this possible. And Ms. Hughes agreeing. There was an amazing street dedication yesterday. Let's celebrate Miss Cathy Hughes and the street dedication. And as we were having a conversation about the luncheon, we agreed that we would have a conversation because we want her to, there's some questions that we want to ask of her, but we also want to give her the freedom to be who she is. And she is a pioneer. She is one of the best entrepreneurs in the world, not just in the nation, but in the world. And she is not only a North Omaha legend or an Omaha legend, she is a legend. Let's please give an Omaha welcome back home to Miss Cathy Hughes. Come on, Omaha. We are here to celebrate one of the best in the world, Miss Cathy Hughes.
Thank you. Thank all of you. First and foremost, I always give praise and thanks to God, from whom all blessings flow. Always, yes, please. A round of applause for the Creator. I think that it is truly a blessing to have a person's voice amplified, so I try never to use a microphone before I first say, thank God. We were worried about everybody seeing. Yeah. And I don't want to, after all of the pomp and circumstance and wonderful activities, slide my behind off this chair in front of 500 people. So I'm going to remain standing. Okay, you're going to have to walk with me. I can't get up this high at 71. Okay. Bloop.
Is it okay if we just flow with that? That's all right? Yeah. So we said we were going to have a conversation. And one of the first things is I've heard you speak, Ms. Hughes, and right here from North Omaha.
Yep.
And can you talk to us about growing up in North Omaha? Can you talk to us about that
well,
experience?
It started at the Logan Fontanelle projects. Right on, let's hear it for Logan Fontanelle. When I was a kid, Finley Ice Company was on 24th Street in front of the projects I grew up in. And I have these fond memories of Easter. They would dye the chickens and give us little baby chickens. That was their contribution to the black community at that time. The problem is the dye killed all the little baby chickens and traumatized all the children. So we were happy for about 48 hours. But one of the things that I tell people, when I'm the oldest of four, my brother Billy Woods is here, who still lives in Omaha. Big round of applause for my brother. Thank you. Billy. One of the things, my mother had 3 children after me. She never had anyone stay with me. She never had anyone stay with me and Billy, or me, Billy, and Bobby when she went to have Jackie. We were in the projects. They came over, the neighbors cooked, cleaned, took care of us, got us ready for school. There was never anyone that had to take care of us. It was truly a village. We went from house to house. And whoever had had a blessing, sometimes One family would have more food than the other. The word spread, go over. They've got so-and-so at their house, okay? Because normally it was pork and beans and wieners was the regular menu in the housing projects. But every now and then, somebody who worked, maybe, for a rich family, got a chicken. We all went over and got the chicken. You haven't had fun till you take a wing and split it 3 ways and pray that you don't get the actual wing. But the love, the support for me in this community, then we went to Mississippi for a month, where my mother was from, Piney Woods for a minute, not for a month. We stayed 2 years, actually. Then when we came back, we moved to 32nd and Paxton Boulevard. And again, Johnny Rogers, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. To see a sign saying Cathy Hughes Boulevard, even Martin Luther King got streets and avenues. I got a boulevard. Woo! So I thank Johnny, and that says a lot about how this community has changed and evolved, because Johnny and I both shared, as so many people in this room, Charlie Washington. We felt that we were his 2 favorite. Everyone else felt that too, but they were wrong. All right, and during Charlie's day, it wouldn't have mattered. Johnny could have won a Heisman Trophy and a Pulitzer Prize and a Nobel Peace Prize and could not have gotten Omaha, Nebraska to put a black woman's name up on a boulevard. Give yourselves a round of applause, because this community has progressed. This community has understood that there's so many things that if you work together that you can get accomplished. And I know that Charlie and Mildred Brown yesterday were smiling down. Maybe not down. Maybe a glance up. But no, both of them were smiling down, saying, job well done, Johnny Rogers and Vicki Parks and the team that made that possible.
Awesome, awesome.
An empowerment conference with this many people, this never could have taken place in my childhood, my young adulthood here in Omaha. This is impressive.
You mentioned, and I love when you talk about the village, because that's
yes.
when we talk about rebuilding
the love,
the village.
The support.
Yes.
Because one person can't do this. One person can have an idea. One person can't build a business. You have to have a team. A team decides whether or not you're going to succeed. You can't do it by yourself.
And so you mentioned this, and as I've heard and read more about it, that your whole family are pioneers. And can you talk about the family and being raised with the family that you have?
All right. This is interesting because I was honored in 2016 when Howard University renamed their School of Communications in my honor. And I decided to kind of check on my family. Teresa Glass's sister Joanne was yesterday bragging about how they're researching their family and learning all about. I did not know that my grandfather's grandfather founded the first school of higher learning in the state of Michigan. His name was Pryor Foster. And my daughter, Trina, actually found him, because I'm spelling Pryor, P-R-Y-O-R, and I didn't come up with anything. His name was P-R-I-O-R, Pryor. He was prior to the Foster, evidently. So I come from a generation of individuals who have been committed to education. My grandfather, Dr. Lawrence C. Jones, my mother's father, founded the Piney Woods Country Life School, which I'm proud to say 111 years later, I still have 150 children in Piney Woods, Mississippi getting an education. So then my mother decided that she wanted to be an entertainer. Well, my grandfather was so into education that he actually told my mother that she would have been better off if she had decided to be a prostitute than an entertainer. He said prostitutes get paid, black entertainers don't. So my grandfather, and my mother were estranged until I came along and everyone felt that I was his reincarnation. So they made up. My mother married William A. Woods. And my daddy was the first black graduate in accounting from Creighton University, 50 years to the day. And couldn't get a job in Omaha. Okay, could not get a job. Let me go back a little bit on my daddy. My daddy was a high school dropout. And when he married my mother, back in those days, GED was not a test. It was a course that you had to take in order to get your high school diploma. So she made him go to Omaha Tech and take the course and get his high school diploma, and then got him through Father John Marcoux into Creighton University, where he completed his 4 years of college as he waited tables at the Omaha Club and ran on as a waiter on the Union Pacific Railroad between Omaha and Pocatello, Idaho. And when their manifest wasn't full, I had a wonderful treat because he would take me on the train with him. I would just get on the train, we'd ride to Pocatello, Idaho, turn around and come right back. So I grew up with this exposure. I didn't know that Idaho wasn't cool. It wasn't Omaha, and I was getting out of the projects for the day, so I was happy. So my father ended up renting space at the Omaha Star and opening an accounting practice. And that same office that my daddy used to rent years ago, Woods Accounting Service stayed at the Omaha Star for about 3 or 4 years, and then moved to Dr. Solomon's building on 24th and Wirt. It was Ray Gaines, an attorney, my daddy, Woods Accounting Service, and Dr. Solomon was on the other side. And the best thrill of my life that I still remember was going right into the next block to, I think it was called Reed's Ice Cream, and getting a banana split, the best in the world. And excuse me, during this time, my parents were part of an organization that Father John Marcoux and Father Kalorn of St. Benedict's Church had founded, called the DePorres Club. The DePorres Club at that time was picketing the streetcars of Omaha, Nebraska, because they would not allow black people to drive the streetcars. So finally, Metro gave in and said, okay, we're going to hire not only a black person, a colored person, or a Negro as we were called then, but also a woman. And thank you. No, it's too, they're not going to be able to see in the back, I was told. That's the reason. Yeah, a booster, that's what I need. So anyway, long story short, the streetcar company caved in and decided they not only would hire somebody black, someone Negro, but they would also hire a woman. And they picked my mother. There was just one little problem. My mother did not have a driver's license. I can remember as early as 5 years old, my mother hitting me behind the head saying, hold the sign up straight. Because I'd be so tired, we'd be marching and protesting. But then years later, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I held the sign up straight, and I led protest. And I realized it was ingrained. I didn't need Black History Month in school because at St. Benedict's, we had St. Martin de Porres, a black saint in front of our church. On our altar, we had a black Jesus. So I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska in a segregated community because at that time, all black folks lived in North Omaha unless you were connected with the Air Force. Then a few of us lived in South Omaha. There was no east or west occupation of this city for black folks, okay? I grew up with black pride, even in a segregated environment. My attorney, Ray Gaines, he was a black attorney. My doctor, Dr. Solomon, or Dr. Johnson, they were black doctors. I didn't have a problem when I got to D.C. identifying with a majority population of black folks because I was reared in Omaha, Nebraska, and I was proud of who I was because of this city.
Awesome. Awesome. You mentioned the Omaha Star.
Yes.
And
Mildred Brown.
Go ahead. So how did you get your start? I mean, you are one of the top entrepreneurs in the world. How did you get your start?
I thank you for that. I'm going to take you on the road with me, Willie. I like that introduction.
I'm ready to go. Let's go.
I've never been introduced as in the world. My staff hear that. I've gone global in Omaha. My father, as I said, rented space in the Omaha Star. That was our first location for our accounting office. And Mildred gave me my first job. Charlie Washington taught me how to be proud of my blackness. Mildred Brown taught me how to not compromise, not discount my blackness, something that we are known for in the world of broadcasting. In the world of broadcasting, even though WBLS in New York City was the #1 radio station in the United States of America because it was #1 in New York, advertisers paid them less than they would pay a country radio station in Omaha, Nebraska, even though they were in New York, because their audience was black and Puerto Rican, basically, in New York. Well, my business partner and my son, Alfred Liggins, and I weren't going for that. We want full value for our black audience, and we insisted on that with advertisers. I learned that from Mildred Brown. Mildred Brown did not allow you all to be discounted because it was a weekly newspaper. She wanted the black readership of the Omaha Star to have the same value as a white readership to the Omaha World Herald. And some of the articles that both Ernie Chambers and Charlie Washington wrote, particularly in their time, were probably some of the most militant articles written in the United States by any black journalist. All right? And so that's the environment I grew up in, and I show up in a city that at that time was 78% black. I was like, yeah, utopia. All right? There were 80,000 people in one section, black people of one section of Washington, D.C. But I learned to be proud and be honest about being proud of being of African descent. But I also learned at the Omaha Star that you don't discount it. You don't take a discount for being black. In fact, there's sometimes we charge premiums for our audiences.
I want to build on that. Yeah, go ahead, let's celebrate that. That's a premium. Understanding our value.
Excuse me, the two nice ladies that brought me the chair, if they'd be nice enough to bring me a napkin because these lights. I don't want one of my eyelashes to float out there in anybody's salad.
Well, we learned this morning from Jalen that it's worth well, that's
Thank
all right.
you.
So amazing.
I feel like a singer. You know how they be hopping down on stage?
Go ahead, belt one out. No, so you talked about going to D.C., and I keep coming back to that. You're not only a North Omaha legend, but across your example, and you touched yesterday on raising your son as a single mother.
Yes.
And then overcoming getting turned out. How have you just talk about that experience, and how have you continued to press forward and accomplish what you've accomplished? Again,
because I saw in Omaha people pressing forward. We didn't give up in Omaha. And I talk about this often on the lecture circuit that I'm frequently on, that when you grow up in an environment like Omaha, and you battle in the summertime with temperatures oftentimes over 100 degrees, and in the wintertime when it got to 0, you thought you could take off your coat because it was a heat wave. You learn to persevere. You learn to have determination. When you learn not to let Mother Nature turn you around, then human beings are easy. And when I went to Washington, D.C., and realized that there weren't people of color, nor were there any women doing what I wanted to do, I just kept my eye on the prize. I refused to allow anyone to turn me around the same way you all don't stop. I remember I was here several years ago, and there was an opening of a club, and there was a bad snowstorm. And I said, oh, I guess we won't be going, because in D.C., when it snows or rains, people stay home because it's government. They can call in and use their leave. But here, people call and say, what do you mean? No, it's not over. We're going to go. It's not canceled. We're going to go. When you learn to persevere in all types of elements dealing with Mother Nature, then business is really, really, really a lot easier for you, because you learn that determination that you can't let anything turn you around. You can't stop.
That's good. And I know you have, your son is here.
Alfred Liggins. Stand up, please, my baby.
And at this conference,
born right here in Omaha, Nebraska.
at the conference, we're really looking at legacy wealth, legacy development, entrepreneurship.
Oh my God, legacy is the hardest. Generational businesses are the very hardest. It's very difficult for a parent to give the combination to the safe to the same kid who would lose the keys to the house. Very difficult. Not to mention the fact that most of us do not want to relinquish the power. That's a very difficult. Alfred and I had to go to counseling, all right? Because one of us was going to die during those early years. It was not happy times during those times, and it was basically my refusal. One of the things I talk about with young people a lot is knowing when it's time to allow your children to take charge. One of the things that we mostly still do in the black community is we build wealth through real estate. But we don't leave the house to our children until our children and grandchildren have their own houses and are not interested in moving into the house that we've had for the last 40, 50 years. If you allow that young person to have that house when they're in their 20s and use it as collateral, they can start a business. They can tour the world. And I say, what type of trifling child would allow their parents to be homeless after they gave them the house? All right? So if you got a kid that you don't trust, they're going to lose the house if you allow them to use it as collateral to do things, then don't give them the house. You're right. But the overwhelming majority of us have reared our children where this is an opportunity. So what happens with that collateral is that the parents die or the grandparents die, leave you the house. The first thing that happens is it goes on sale because the young person doesn't have any use for it. It can be of no value, yet this same young person may have struggled for years to operate their business and could have used that house as the opportunity for them to build that business and to expand. So one of the things that I encourage those of us who are in business to do is to know when it's really time to allow fresh ideas, fresh blood, the next generation to come in. It's not easy, but it certainly would cause you to be able to take your venture to the next level. I get a lot of credit that Alfred actually has been responsible for. Alfred did TV One on his own. Radio One was me. And I think that Alfred, once he took charge, he fooled me. I know he didn't want me telling this story. He came into my office one day, and he said, "Mama, I got to be president of our company." I said, "Why is that, Alfred?" He said, "Because there's this organization called the Young Presidents Club, and it's for executives under the age of 30. And there's so many advertising agencies that are represented in this club. And if I get into the Young Presidents Club, then I'll be able to bring business to the company that we wouldn't normally have gotten." Alfred has not been to not one meeting in the Young Presidents Club. I went for it. I said, "Oh yeah, we got to change your title. I got to step aside. You need to be the president because we're going to get some additional business." Plus, there weren't any advertising agencies in the Young Presidents Club. It's very difficult, though, even if you change the title, to understand when you've got to let the next generation lead. There's a survey, some research that just came out that many of you in the room may be aware of, and they compared thousands of upper middle class black children to exactly their white counterparts. And the research found that the white children would grow up and get involved in things even more important and more profitable for themselves than their parents. The black children would go backwards, would not even reach the economic level that their black parents, even though the white parents and the black parents had equal education, the same identical income coming in the family, but the second generation in the African American family would in fact regress, would in fact lose money, and oftentimes, more often than not, would end up in poverty, even though their families, their parents had been affluent. That's scary, very scary. And part of that, I think, can be addressed, Willie, when you realize that you need to bring the child, they're adults now, they're grown men and women, into the company and allow them to take charge.
Yes. And on that note, I know that when your father had his business, you were doing books even as a child.
Oh my God, it was
so
called
you
Prentice
grew up.
Hall Ledger. That was my first job. Prentice Hall would send out the IRS, the Internal Revenue Codes, every week. And every week you had to, it was like an encyclopedia of tax laws. And every week you had to replace the old legislation with the new legislation. That's how fast it was coming from Prentice Hall. That was my first job. Then I learned how to do the short form. It was a card. If you made under a certain amount of money, you could fill out a card. And my father taught me how to fill out the cards, because oftentimes all you had to do was list your income and whether or not you had any deductions. And a lot of people had zero. I know how to do the zero. Okay, all right. And we charged $10 for the short form. And my daddy would give me $5. I was filling out forms like you would not believe. I was stopping people on the street. Have you filed your taxes? If you go to Woods Accounting, okay, we'll fill out the short form for you for $10. Then my daddy, at 10 p.m. on April the 14th, every year would put me in line at the IRS building with a stack of extensions, because they had to be postmarked during that time before midnight. And I would stand for 2 hours in line with all the extensions, and then after I got them all postmarked at the post office and back to the office, I would go through them and decide which ones could be the short form so I could make $5.
So we're on the business part, and you have grown a tremendous company. One of the goals that we have is creating a culture of entrepreneurship in North Omaha. What would you say to us as a collective about learning from your experiences on how to make that happen at a greater level?
I want to go back if I could, because I got, when I decided to tell the story, Alfred doesn't like for me to tell about the Young Presidents Club. I didn't finish the point about TV One. TV One was totally Alfred. Radio One was me. Alfred decided that he wanted his own path, that he wanted to do something years and years and years ago when BET first came on the air. They had a lot of glitches, if you remember back. Sometimes they'd run 2 commercials at times, and then sometimes they'd run the commercial right on top of the show. Sometimes you couldn't hear the music. And Alfred one day was watching, and he decided as a very young person that he should be in cable, that we should be in cable. He tried to convince me to sell our radio company and go strictly into cable. Luckily, he had already run the okey-doke on me one time. I wasn't going twice. And so I said no, and he decided that we would do both. But our expansion, our going public, all of that was, in fact, Alfred. I love the fact that I like to phrase it as he does the heavy lifting and I get to take all the bows. Good son, good mother relationship.
So how do we take your experience and know-how and infuse that into what we're working on in North Omaha?
Well, Willie, you know, one of the things that happens once you receive any type of notoriety is that people want you to give advice. And there really is no advice on how you do it. If there were a rule book, everybody would be in business. One of the things that I say that I thought I was always good at was recognizing opportunities, and that's what I encourage other people to do. So often, we're so obsessed, we're so focused on, is our company going to make some money? Are we going to be able to complete this housing project? Are we going to be able to build something? There's a woman here today who came to share the glorious weekend with me named Beverly McKenna. Her husband was just elected the first black coroner. I've got to tell this story. I shared it yesterday. There have only been 2 black elected coroners in the last 300 years. The last time a black man was elected coroner in the United States of America, the year was 1894. I know, Google it, check it out. You will find out that that's an area that African Americans, just now, he just opened that door. Well, anyway, in their neighborhood, there was a block. And this block had various stores that were all boarded up. And Beverly and her husband bought the property for little or nothing because nobody wanted it. Now there are 5 highly successful black businesses who could afford the rent that Beverly and her husband were willing to charge them to come. And I mean, thriving businesses. One business, in fact, is so good, and it's called the Black Shop. You can buy memorabilia, clothes, I mean, just beautiful things in this shop. It was so good that in the New Orleans Museum has asked this sister to open a branch up in the museum. Now, that would not have occurred if Beverly and her husband, 2 black people who use their own personal resources to create opportunities for others. One of the things that we've got to get better at, segregation messed up a lot of things for other communities. It was very good for us because we did business with each other. We were forced to, but it was wonderful because then our businesses prospered, and in those days, we looked out and created opportunities for each other. Once integration came along, we started thinking like other cultures thought, that their ice was colder than ours, so we should go over here and get the colder ice. We started thinking that it was more status worthy for us to have a white lawyer than to go to Attorney Gaines when we didn't have a choice. Attorney Gaines wasn't losing any cases. What happened to him was that once that opportunity opened up. But Willie, I really do believe that we've come full circle, and that African Americans, particularly those of us in business, realize that we've got to open up opportunities for other businesses the same way the McKennas have in New Orleans. I think that when I drove down 24th Street yesterday, it was so disturbing to just see lots. It looked like Detroit to me. Okay, not even grass on the lots, just dirt. When I was a kid growing up, there were so many businesses, you have to say, oh, I didn't know that. I remember going to TikTok and the Fair Deal and a whole host of other places up and down that same corridor now. But when I look at South Omaha, another culture has come in and done exactly what I think we should be doing. All right? And that's how North Omaha should look. That whole strip needs to be revitalized, reestablished.
That's right.
And we can only do that by working together.
That's it. I will do this. Say, let us build.
Yes.
I know we need to close out, and we want to do some things.
Oh, I thought we were going to stay all afternoon.
Oh, let's go. Come on. We can go. I know yesterday you mentioned at the street dedication, one of the biggest things that businesses are challenged with is getting access to credit and capital. You went through 32, 33 some before someone invested in you. Can you touch on that?
Well, again, another one of my dearest friends for many, many years now, almost 45, is also here with me from Washington, D.C., Marcella Jones, whose husband, Terry Jones, he and his partner started a company called Syndicated Communications. And they went into business strictly for the purpose of making capital available to African Americans, although they did not limit themselves just to African Americans. I was talking to her husband the other day about the fact that the first time J-Lo ever made a movie, it was a movie about a Mexican superstar artist. J-Lo didn't have T nor A during those days. She was this big, okay? And J-Lo had not become J-Lo. She was just Jennifer Lopez. And it was interesting because it was a Native American who made the movie. But a black man loaned me my first $1 million to go into business, her husband. And then took me to those banks. I didn't go to those banks by myself. Her husband went with me to all of those lending institutions. And I would leave, probably the first 10 or 15, I'd leave out like, I don't think we're going to be able to do this, Terry. Terry's like, that type of attitude, you never will succeed. So I've got to give you the advice that her husband gave me many, many years ago, almost 4 decades ago. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. We do our own worst PR on ourselves. He said, if you say, oh, that was interesting, I'll have to find someone else, because the law of averages says if you ask enough people, it's got to turn around. There has to be a yes. It can't always be a no. And he said to me, so when people ask you how you doing, he would hear me complaining and say, oh, I don't know. He said, you got to say, oh, it was a great day. He said, because the first person that hears the lie is you. Lie to yourself. Tell yourself your business is doing good. Tell yourself you're going to make it. Tell yourself you're going to succeed. And guess what? Everyone's going to start agreeing with you. Oh, did you hear? They're doing real good. Who'd you hear that from? I heard it from her. Okay, she would know it's her business. He told me to change my terminology, which changed my thinking, because I was the first person to hear it. And guess what? One day it was no longer a lie. It became my truth. Woo!
You said, and we're going to close with this. You said something to me last week when we talked, and it just has been circling, that Omaha pushes you to be the best.
Absolutely.
Speak to that.
I think that Omaha teaches you how to best your best. It's kind of like the game of golf. It's the same game, but you got to try to do better today than you did last week. You've got to learn to best your best. And Omaha practices tough love. So if you have the nerve to leave here and go someplace else, you better hope you do good, because if you come home, yeah, girl, you went over there to D.C. You didn't do so good, I heard. So why you back here? You don't want to hear that. But it's really love telling you, you should have done better. You should have been more persistent. That whole village concept sometimes is not comfortable, but it's so productive. It is so very productive, because it pushes you to best your best. It teaches you that when you come home one day, even though you may be 71 years old, they may hang a sign and name a boulevard in your honor.
Omaha, let's please celebrate Miss Cathy Hughes. I've said it before, she is a worldwide legend, and it's amazing, born and raised right here in North Omaha. We celebrated her. Again, Johnny Rogers, thank you so much for your leadership in making this happen with a street dedication. Yeah, let's recognize Johnny Rogers. Matter of fact, thank you. We want to celebrate Omaha's own with the North Omaha Legends Award. And I want to read this, honoring North Omaha natives that are making a global impact. Yes, Ms. Hughes, you are global. Celebrating your outstanding lifetime achievements and your significant investments and contributions to empower individuals and communities through the power of information. Let's please, Omaha, once again, celebrate Ms. Hughes, Ms. Cathy Hughes. North Omaha legend, Omaha legend, global legend, Miss Cathy Hughes.